The best in the West in association with Access Credit Union. Access Credit Union is your trusted local financial partner. Access your money 24/7 from anywhere in the world with an Access Credit Union current account and enjoy all the benefits while keeping your money local. We support local communities. We support you.
Close your eyes and pull like a dog.
And a new Irish record for Phil Healy, 22.99.
Christy Cooney hands over the Sam Maguire Cup to Graham Canty, Cork All-Ireland champions for the 7th time ever.
Hello and welcome to the Star Sport Podcast. My name is Jack McCarran of the Southern Star, and I'm joined as always by Star Sport editor Kieran McCarthy. On today's podcast, we're previewing the Best in the West semi-finals as our search for West Cork's greatest ever sportsperson reaches the business end. The Best in the West is brought to you by Access Credit Union. Access Credit Union is your trusted local financial partner. Access your money 24/7 from anywhere in the world with an Access Credit Union current account and enjoy all the benefits while keeping your money local. In the first semi-final, which gets underway on Saturday morning at 10 a.m. on Kieran's Twitter page, it will be road bowling legend Bill Daly up against Keith Cronin, one of Ireland's greatest ever rally drivers. And on Sunday, Olympic silver medalist Paul O'Donovan goes head to head with Ireland's fastest woman, Phil Healy, in semi-final number 2. Author and journalist Denis Hurley will be on in part 2 to preview Paul versus Phil, and in a few minutes Bowl Cumann PRO Pat McCarthy will join us to make the case for Bill to win. But first, the Southern Star's motorsport correspondent Martin Walsh is standing by to canvass for Keith Cronin to be named Best in the West.
Over the last couple of weeks, Martin, we've seen Keith Cronin first take out an international soccer player in Conor Hourihan and then get the better of West Cork's greatest ever camogie player, Jennifer O'Leary, in the quarterfinals. And all the time, Keith Cronin is building momentum through Best in the West. Why do you think people are giving Keith their vote?
Well, I suppose it's first of all for his talent, but I think, every one of the 16 people that started out on this journey for the Best in the West deserved to be the Best in the West, and it shows, how great the area is with talented people. But rallying, I suppose, in GA you have the club sector, whereas rallying, I think it's all over the country, and Keith pulls his votes, I suppose, from everywhere, and indeed outside the country as well. And the fact that he's won the British Rally Championship several times, he's very well known in England and indeed wider afield. So I think that's probably one of the reasons for it. Whereas, some of the other stars might just be very local but have a huge following.
Then I mentioned there about Keith's votes in the last couple of rounds, and the 2 polls he's been involved in have accumulated the most votes. And you mentioned the word there as well, Martin, the word talent. When people talk about Keith Cronin, like the word talent, it always comes up in the conversation because he's an incredibly talented driver. Can you talk us through, I suppose, his achievements over the years, because his role of honour is second to none?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, he's in a sport that nowadays talent isn't the uppermost important thing, which is sad, in a way, because if a guy is gifted at football, or particular soccer, like Conor Hourihan, he goes, around to a British club and gets to play in the Premiership, whereas, the likes of Keith Cronin can't go to the very top in his sport without a huge amount of money. And the money we're talking about here is millions, and that's the sad thing about it, that talent isn't of the primary importance here. It's money guides really, I think, what goes into motorsport, but all the other people, it's talent. If you're a good golfer, you get to the top relatively easy. No, I don't mean easy in that sense, but compared to what is required to make it to the world level in rallying. And Keith started way back in 2004 in the Peugeot 106, and he started in that type of car where, a one-make series whereby very little done to the car, and talent is to the fore, and I think it's the one thing that's probably lacking in rallying nowadays is a one-make series whereby you can judge the drivers rather than judge the cars. But Keith made a great progression, and in 5 or 6 years he was right up there, and he was on a Pirelli Star Driver competition in 2008, and in 2009 he went on to win British Rally Championship. Like within 5 years of starting out at the very basic in rally, he became a British Rally champion, and he was the first driver to do that since 1974 when the great Billy Coleman won it. So you can see, I suppose, for 30 odd years there was a dearth of talent, of Irish talent going across to Britain, and Keith goes along and he actually wins his first time out in his real attempt, which, he only went there into that season to get practice for a tilt at the title in 2010.
I think what's remarkable too, Martin, and you've covered it well in the Southern Star over the years, that Keith has won the British Rally Championship on 4 different occasions, 2009, like you mentioned, and also 2010, 2012 and 2017. And remarkably, he's done it in 4 different cars. How does that kind of stand as a feat to win 4 British Rally Championships, but in 4 different cars?
Well, I think that shows the extent of his talent, and he's also done it with 4 different co-drivers. In the first year, he did it with Greg Shenners, then Barry McNulty, then Marshall Clark, and then in 2017 with Killarney's Mikey Galvin. And that shows as well, that he gets supreme confidence from his co-drivers, but I think the co-drivers know as well the talent of their driver that they're sitting beside, and each one of those that I've spoken to over the years, they've just, phenomenal is the word that comes back from them of when they want to describe Keith's talent. And the one thing I suppose that stands out here as well, and maybe not a lot of people will, maybe recognise it or even take it as an interesting fact, is that all his cars are left-hand drive cars. And when he started out to get the first title in 2009, he did it in the British Championship, as we said. But the British Championship is a mix of gravel events and tarmac. So not alone is he good on tarmac, but he's also good on what we call loose surface events. So again, that shows the wide range of his talent, not just from to adapt to a new co-driver, but also to adapt to various surfaces, because even at the world scale nowadays, drivers who are better on tarmac or better on gravel, and Keith just seemed to be at home on any surface at all.
You've been a great canvasser for Keith and the rest over the last couple of weeks, Martin. For those listening to this podcast now and they're on the fence whether it's going to be Keith Cronin or Bill Daly they're going to vote for in Saturday's semi-final, tell them why they should give Keith their vote.
Well, I suppose firstly, Kieran, when we look at the 2 semi-finals, I don't know whether you had a huge influence in the way this has all worked out, but you've got, Keith and Bill Daly on Saturday, and of course Bill is somebody I know very well from growing up and going to school in Lepo originally, but I suppose their semi-final could be termed the Battle of the King of the Roads, and whereas the other battle is a battle for the fastest running on the track against the fastest guy in the water. So, we have no GA superstar in there, but by God, we have 4 great superstars. As for voting for Keith, I think his loyal fans will support him. But there's a great element of camaraderie with all of this as well. And there's a bit of fun about the whole thing as well. And like I've said it earlier, and you know this as well as I do, anybody of the 16 would be a worthy champion. And there's even people outside of that initial 16. And even in motorsport alone, we probably have one of the greatest drivers that ever graced the circuit racing track, Michael Cumann. He didn't feature in that last 16. And, even in rallying, there are other people I wouldn't go to mention because there are so many in rallying that deserve to be up there as well. But Keith has a loyal fan, and there's the websites that support each other and things like that. And I think there's a great bit of banter. We saw it with Jennifer O'Leary. We had Tyrone Camogie clubs getting in on the act, and it's all great. It's great for West Cork as well, and it makes all the other stars that were in the initial 16, people are very much aware of them as well.
My only advice for you, Martin, is get a lot of sleep on Friday night and stock up on the coffee on Saturday, because if the last couple of weeks are anything to go by, you're in for a very long day, evening and night on Saturday. But thanks so much for joining us.
Okay, Kieran, and the best of luck to everybody. And as I said, whoever comes out of this at the end of the day, I think they are a true worthy champion. But we're blessed in West Cork. We have terrific sports people, and long may that continue.
The best in the West in association with Access Credit Union. Access Credit Union is your trusted local financial partner. Access your money 24/7 from anywhere in the world with an Access Credit Union current account and enjoy all the benefits while keeping your money local. We support local communities. We support you.
Delighted to be joined on the line by Pat McCarthy, the road bowling correspondent with us in the Southern Star. Pat, we've a road bowler, Bill Daly, through to the last 4 in Best in the West. I suppose before we chat about Bill himself, for road bowling to have a semi-finalist in Best in the West, it must be a nice boost for the sport locally.
Absolutely, we're thrilled to the world with it. There's no doubt about it. It was something we didn't expect. We couldn't have predicted our tweeters would have come up so strongly in favour of Bill, but we did have a great candidate. We're, as I say, thrilled. 2 legendary people there in Declan Byrne and Graham Canty to have overcome both those people is great. But it's all good fun anyway. And in Bill, we had a great candidate, a man who was a legend in his own way. It's certainly a legend in our bowling game. We're delighted to be at this stage.
Like you mentioned there, Pat, I suppose Bill Daly got the better of Declan Byrne in the first round, and then Graham Canty in the quarter-final. And next up is a man from out that direction as well, Keith Cronin from Ballylickey. But just on Bill Daly, kind of he's a left man. He's one of the great figures of road bowling. Can you fill us in a small bit about what made Bill Daly such a great road bowler?
Well, Bill is a Lip native, as most people know. He started off, he was an under-18 champion when he was back in Lip, and he played in the junior ranks for a few years then, before he moved to the city to his work duties. And it was then his career really blossomed. Back in the late 70s, early 80s, he became one of the truly big players in the game, and he had a status and aura that was huge for in bowling at the time, I suppose. He started with a dual gold medal winning performance in Holland in 1980, and that set him up for almost a decade of dominance in the game here, in the bowling game here in Ireland, winning King of the Roads. He won an All-Ireland. He lost 2 then that are still memorable in the sense. I don't think he lost any caste in those defeats, but they were thrilling scores. And he was a huge name, 5 King of the Roads, and he kind of set up that magnificent tournament as well. His presence was very instrumental in making it what it is today. And I think Kieran probably more. Those World Championships came then, of course, 85 and 87. They all added to his luster. And I suppose, Kieran, it's fair to say that his European journey was truly phenomenal. He represented Ireland on the European stage and those European internationals, which we treasure, 8 times. And he had a gold medal winning performances in 1980, and he was on the podium again in 84. Another gold medal in 92, and he was a massive presence on Irish teams for almost 2 decades. And I'd say that it all adds up to a very significant personality in the game, and one that is looked up to and still is hugely.
You've kind of gone through some of his, I suppose, kind of his medal haul over the years, and it's truly phenomenal, Pat. Bill Daly is like a former world champion, European champion, All-Ireland senior champion, 5-time King of the Roads. He's won 5 county senior titles. It's an incredible collection of honours over the years. And where does Bill rank in the kind of, when we talk about the all-time greats of road bowling? Obviously, Mick Barry will be at the top. He's such an iconic figure, but I'm presuming Bill Daly must be he's not too far behind, is he?
Well, he would not certainly, Kieran, no. I am, it's all, I suppose, relative, but he would definitely be in the top 5 of all-time greats. I'd say Michael Cole would have to be in there as well. Then there's Denny McFarland also from the north. And there's people, Pat Butler and others there, the current top men as well. But Bill has to be in there in the top. His longevity and his achievements would rank him almost certainly in the top 5, possibly in the top 3 in many people's estimation. So it's been a good week or so for road bowling, because it's been great to see that underage scores have started again this week with the COVID-19 restrictions starting to ease. So are you hoping for
for road bowling's resurgence to keep going this Saturday when he takes on Keith Cronin in the Best in the West semi-final? And have you been rallying the troops, getting ready for an active day on social media this Saturday, Pat?
We have, Kieran, there's no doubt about it. We've been rallying pretty well there, and a lot of people have helped as well. And as I say, it was a new journey for us in bowling, but it was great to be included in the first place, and we couldn't have had a better candidate. But we'll do our best again. Keith is obviously, his sport would be much more popular nationwide. If he can muster all his troops, it would be very hard to beat him. But we'll give it a good go, and we look forward immensely to the challenge again. And as I say, we're thrilled to be in the last 4. There were 16 outstanding candidates at the outset, and it's very good for our game and good for its profile. And we'll be rooting for Bill big time.
And I think, Pat, as well, for what this shows is almost a reflection of, I suppose, how important road bowling is as a sport in West Cork. As we all know, kind of like Cork is probably one of the real strongholds of road bowling in the country, as well as up the north in Armagh. So it's great to see a road bowler in the last 4, because the sport is very, very strong here. And before I let you go, can you just tell me, I suppose, the kind of how strong the connection is in West Cork, kind of when you talk about road bowling, how big the sport is locally?
Well, it's big enough, I suppose. Still, it's a credit to the people involved that it has maintained a pretty good level of following and good standard of play, and its ranking within the sports of West Cork is still up there, pretty good. I mean, it's overcome huge challenges there in the past 20 years with soccer teams and rugby becoming prominent, all fine sports as well, and underage GAA people. Our good bowlers are pretty good at all other sports as well, and it's difficult to keep it all going. But I think once the championship starts and once a momentum starts, and then it kind of generates its own interest, which is good. And I think the sport itself, the fact that it's a good manly man-to-man contest, and there's skill and athleticism involved, I don't think it's a sport that will die easily. Like, it's a continuing challenge, and there's insurance issues and everything. There's a continuing challenge to keep it going, and we'll need new blood at administration levels as well. But it is strong, and it has stayed strong even when we thought it might decline, because it has over the centuries there declined in places and come back again. But it is good, as you said previously there, that our game is back there now after the COVID restrictions. Our new chairman, Michael Brennan, arranged that. He's been very responsible in his outlook on that, and his the general keeping bowling quite as much as possible anyway when the restrictions were in place. And it's good that it's back, and we look forward to competitions, not on the scale that we would have in past summers, of course, but we would hope to have a championship anyway by the end of the year.
Oh, fantastic. Best of luck to the row bowling community and Bill Daly this weekend, Pat. He was underdog in his first 2 rounds, and he came through them both, so we won't write Bill Daly off at all this Saturday. So
no, we won't write him off. Yeah, we will back him to the hills, and he's a very good opponent, and Keith as well, and we'll keep it going. It's great to be involved in it, and we'll hope for the best on Saturday. We'll have as many as we can on the Twitter line.
The Best in the West in association with Access Credit Union. Access Credit Union is your trusted local financial partner. Access your money 24/7 from anywhere in the world with an Access Credit Union current account, and enjoy all the benefits while keeping your money local. We support local communities. We support you.
Welcome back to the Star Sport Podcast, and we're going to switch our attention to semi-final number 2 now, which sees Olympic silver medalist Paul O'Donovan up against Ireland's fastest woman, Phil Healy. To help us preview this one, we're joined on the line by sports journalist Denis Hurley, whose work you'll find in the Southern Star and the Irish Examiner, as well as a variety of other outlets. Denis, before we look at Phil and Paul, I wanted to get your thoughts on Best in the West generally. One of the names that's cropped up repeatedly throughout this process has been that of Castlehaven legend Larry Tompkins. In your Hurley on the Ditch column a few weeks back, you questioned whether Larry being left out of the final 16 based on his Kildare roots was fair, considering John Caulfield was included despite being born in New York. You've also penned a soon-to-be released book on Tompkins, which we might chat about in a little more detail later on. But could you maybe, to start us off, make the case for Larry and tell us why we, as a selection committee, were wrong to overlook him.
I never got so far to say you were totally wrong. Now, to be fair, Jack, and I suppose, like you mentioned, I do have a vested interest. It certainly suited the sales agenda to give it a good mention in the column a couple of weeks ago. But you know, like I said in the column, he had such a transformative effect on Cork football, West Cork football, Castlehaven. You know, before the Haven won in '89, I think you had to go back nearly 2 decades for the last time a West Cork team won the county championship. And then Haven won 89, Skip 92, Haven 94 again, Bantry 95 and 98, Donaghilty 96, Bear 97. Like it is, I think Castlehaven's success gave everyone else the belief that they could kind of, with a bit of a push, get up to that level too. And you know, knowing the kind of character Larry is and what he brought to Cork and Castlehaven, you know, he was definitely a kind of a driving force in the Haven getting to that level. And you know, it gave everyone else then a target to aim for. But you know, fair is fair. He wasn't born in West Cork or in Cork. He's a blow-in to the area, and he doesn't live in West Cork anymore either. I know he's still involved with Castlehaven, and Castlehaven are his club, but you know, being fully objective about it, I'd have found it hard to pick one of the 16 to leave out. I know that there are others not in the 16 who you could also make a case for. You know, we're talking about Paul O'Donovan here, and people are probably justifiably wondering why Gary O'Donovan isn't in there. So these things, you know, it's a poll of opinions, and opinions are always going to underpin the debate around it, which is that kind of engagement.
Well, despite Larry not making the final 16, the final 16 was dominated by GAA players. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think we had 6, maybe 7 from camogie, ladies football and hurling. And unbelievably, none of them have made the final 4. I seen a tweet from Mike Downey. He also used the word unbelievable. He said, it's unbelievable that no GAA players have made the last 4. Kieran, I'll come to you on this one first. Is there any obvious reason you can see that no GAA players made it this far, considering they completely dominated the final 16?
It was surprising when you consider that West Cork is seen as the home of football in Cork and a GAA stronghold, which it is, to be fair. I think what we've seen here is different communities coming behind our sport. So we've seen the motorsport community rallying behind Keith Cronin, and the road bowlers coming behind Bill Daly, and obviously Paul O'Donovan is someone with that profile, as is Phil Healy. So they're kind of national figures. So in fairness to Jennifer O'Leary, she really did give it a kind of Keith Cronin a run for his money. And if you look at the votes she got in the last round, it was higher than any other semi-finalist bar Keith Cronin. So Jennifer could have been one of the semi-finalists. It is surprising that there is no kind of GAA person in the last 4, but we've always spoken to and highlighted in the Southern Star that there's such a variety of sports and sports people in West Cork that I think this Best in the West has kind of highlighted that too. Kind of what we're left with is Ireland's fastest woman. We're left with Ireland's greatest rower. We're left with a man who won the British Rally Championship 4 times, and we're left with a man who was a 2-time world road bowling champion, among many others. So the 4 that are there are all there on merit. But like you're right, it is surprising that the GAA didn't have their own representative there. But such, like Denis said, these polls are subjective, and if you get the people behind you, you get through. So I think that's what we've seen over the last couple of weeks, that the different communities have backed their sports person.
Denis, anything in the theory that it's down to the tribal nature of Club GAA in West Cork, in that someone like Graham Canty, who may well have captained Cork to an All-Ireland in 2010, couldn't get support from rival clubs? He was reliant totally on the Bantry Blue faithful. Anything in that? Could you see people not voting for Graham simply because he's a Bantry representative?
Yeah, like it must have been the case, but I would have been very surprised if you told me beforehand that it would be the case, if that makes sense. Like at the outset, I'll be honest, I was full sure a GAA person would win. I didn't know which one. I would have thought Graham Canty would definitely be up there. I would have thought that it would be a GAA person, just because it's the most popular sport in the area and in Ireland. But I was saying it to Kieran last week, like I couldn't get over that there's no GAA person left in the last four, and that it's all kind of people involved in individual sports. I know Paul obviously is in the double sculls, but it's still not a team sport, as it were. And it's I suppose it's very insightful. It probably gives an insight into who is more active on social media, which clubs and teams and sports are more active. But then, to pick an example, a club like Castlehaven have a very strong social media presence, and that wasn't enough to get Niall Callahan over the line. So I think after the poll is over and we found the best in the West, you could probably go back and do an opinion poll to kind of gauge why people voted the way they did.
Let's jump in then to the semi-final that we want to talk about now, and that's of course Paul O'Donovan versus Phil Healy. And before we go too deep into it, I actually just want to make the case for Phil Healy potentially being West Cork's greatest active athlete. Now, we might sound like a broken record on this podcast over the last few weeks. We keep repeating the phrase, she's Ireland's fastest ever woman. But that's nothing to be sniffed at. She's a national record holder over the 100 and 200 metre distance. I was looking at Irish athletics before we started recording this. She's the third fastest ever over 300 metres and 400 metres. In the 4x100 metres, 4 of the top 10 times of all time have featured Phil Healy. This is in a sport that's hugely competitive. There's a huge amount of people who compete in athletics at all levels across the country and across the world. So Kieran, I'm putting Phil forward to be potentially West Cork's greatest active athlete. Maybe not West Cork's greatest all-time athlete yet, but what do you think of that?
I can see where you're coming from, Jack. I think the rowers might have something to say about that, with Paul being a 4-time world champion and a current active sports person. With Shane McCormick on the podcast a couple of weeks back, and he said that Phil Healy is the greatest Irish women's sprinter of all time, and he put forward the stats and figures, and you put forward some there, and you can't argue with that. Like, we called her the Ballerine Bullet for a reason. Like, she's lightning quick, and she's only 25. And the thing with Phil, there is more to come, and you will see her kind of set personal bests and national records over the next couple of years. So she's an incredible sports person, and as well as that, she's a great role model too. And it was Darren McElhinney made the point to me a few weeks ago. He said she's a class act on and off the track. So on the track, she does the business, she wins the races, she sets the times. But off the track, she's such a good role model and ambassador for athletics and West Cork as a result, that it kind of encourages and helps more kids get involved. So she's kind of, in terms of active sports stars in West Cork at the moment, she's right up there. I can see what you're saying. So yeah, she's in with a chance.
Denis, I want to pit rowing versus athletics here. Kieran said that the rowers may have something to say about my claims that Phil Healy is the greatest active West Cork athlete at the minute. But just on the basis of which sport it's actually harder to succeed at, and I know this is getting into tricky territory because it's impossible to say, but an example I used at an earlier stage of the tournament was Conor Howrahan's achievements are perhaps underappreciated because of how difficult it is to actually make it in the Premier League. And I would say similar things about how hard it is for the likes of Phil Healy to compete in athletics, whereas rowing is more of a niche sport, maybe not so in Ireland but around the world. So let's cause an argument here. Is it harder to succeed at the level Phil is in athletics versus what the O'Donovan brothers and Paul in particular has achieved in rowing?
It's very hard to measure, but I do see what you're saying, and you're obviously carrying a very big spoon for stirring that pot. But I can see the logic of it, yeah, because first and foremost, Paul O'Donovan is a member of Skibbereen Rowing Club, which is the top rowing club in the country. So he's coming into a framework, we'll say, a club renowned for developing rowers to be the absolute best they can. So he's coming in with a lot of natural talent, adding a lot of hard work, but he's doing it in a structure that has a huge track record of success. He's obviously had more success than anyone else, and he is the best that there's been so far. But with all due respect to Bandon Athletics Club, they haven't had a plethora of, top national performers and people who've competed in the top international events. And, maybe Phil's success will kind of lead to that kind of culture in there. But she has, I suppose you'd say, she's come on a longer journey, to get from, pardon the pun, the standing start to where she is now. And like you say, it's almost taken for granted, just because she's so consistently good. Like, it's nothing to be sniffed at to be the fastest woman in Ireland, at still a relatively young age. And like Kieran said, that's why they call her the Ballonine Bullet. I think it was he started calling her the Ballonine Bullet and everyone else latched onto it. But definitely, it's not the kind of one that you'd have looked at her when she was starting off and said, gee, she's going to go, she could be an Olympian in the sprints, in which Irish athletes don't normally compete very strongly at. Whereas, I think in Kieran's book, he said that people joining the Skibbereen Rowing Club have, is it a 75% chance of rowing for their country? So Paul was dealing with good odds to start with, and he made the most of those odds, whereas Phil's odds starting off probably weren't as strong, and she has had to battle to work against those odds.
Can I just remember, Jack, for a second, because Denis has made a great point there. Phil was actually chatting on this Zoom video conference a couple of weeks ago, and she made the point when she was in secondary school, either in third or fourth year, that her teacher told her to pack up athletics, that she wasn't going to do much and maybe concentrate on basketball or football. And this was during secondary school, but she persisted at it, and she obviously see where she is now. But during her secondary school days, her early secondary school days, you wouldn't say she was a standout kind of. Would have picked her. There was her sister Joan was a standout athlete in their family when they were younger, and Joan is maybe 2 years older than Phil. So Phil has come an incredible distance in a very short space of time, from probably fourth and fifth year in secondary school to where she is now, to go from someone who wasn't winning medals to someone who's won, I think, 10 goals between indoor and outdoor in the last 5 or 6 years at the national championships. So what Denis is saying there is correct, that she's coming off a long way in a very short period of time, and from compared to Paul, who came into Skibbereen Rowing Club when Eugene Coakley and Timmy Harnedy were there, and they were Olympians, and there was that kind of success breeds success kind of element in Skibbereen Rowing Club. And there was also Dominic Casey, kind of anyone who goes into that rowing club, and if Dominic Casey sees potential in you, he'll give you everything to kind of to bring the best out of you. So Phil has had to work harder to get to the top.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the point I'm trying to make is starting out, if you're to choose rowing or athletics, you're going to have a much more difficult time making it to the top of sprinting. Like sprinting, one of the most watched sports at the Olympic Games, one of the most competitive. But I don't want to take away anything from Paul and his achievements, and I just want to touch on something we spoke about last week, and that's Paul's position as a cultural icon in Ireland. We touched on it a bit last week, but I want to go into it again. Like, the phrase "close the eyes and pull like a dog" has just become part of the way we speak in Ireland. He's loved by housewives, as they would say. Like, so that just means everyone knows who Paul O'Donovan is, and Gary Donovan for that matter, but we're focusing on Paul for now. He was on the Graham Norton show, and like, wherever I go in the world or wherever I go in Ireland and I have a conversation with someone I've never met before, and they say, "Where do you live?" and I say, "I live in Skibbereen," the first thing they always say is, "Do you know the rowers?" or "Have you heard of the rowers?" or "Have you met the rowers?" Essentially, Kieran said it to me just offline before we started recording, they put Skibbereen on the map. In a way, they are Skibbereen. So for a competition like this, which is essentially a popularity contest, we're putting it to the public vote. Denis, I guess the question I'm trying to ask is, like, how much interest do you have in his position as a cultural icon as opposed to just a pure athlete?
Yeah, like that's a fair point too. Like, success in a minority sport doesn't automatically guarantee that you're going to become a household name, but like you say, their performance at the Olympics, like, they were well known in West Cork, and thanks to the Stars covers before the Olympics, but obviously that was what brought them to the wider audience, and it was the showmanship, we'll say. Yeah, and it's like there definitely is a greater interest in them because of that. You know, it's almost like he's a character called playing a character called Paul O'Donovan. You know, sometimes that maybe if you met him away from that and were chatting to him, it mightn't actually be the same. But the public persona definitely is a very strong one, and it mightn't have contributed to the success because he'd be a top rower anyway. But it's probably contributed to the awareness, the wider awareness, and you'd wonder, will that be the defining factor in the vote, that Phil Healy probably goes about her work in a more quiet and understated way, maybe?
Yeah, Kieran, and just to go to you on that point, because as Denis mentioned earlier, you wrote the book on Skibbereen rowing, and I suppose what made the book such an interesting topic, other than the success, was the characters that have come from the club. Dominic was obviously a big part of it, but Gary and Paul themselves as well. So just in writing the book, away from just their success as rowing, because we've talked about that ad nauseum, the way that they have become household names in Ireland, I don't think it takes away from their sporting successes at all. But just in terms of this competition, purely from a popularity stakes and a public poll point of view, do you think that's of benefit to them?
I think, like you mentioned there earlier, Jack, that Gary and Paul run Graham Martin, they've been on the Late Late Show a couple of times. They're almost celeb figures as much as they are sporting figures. And even go back to after the Olympics, I remember one bookies was running odds on who their girlfriends would be. They were at that sort of, it was that sort of level they were at. Kind of, they were, you mentioned, they were cultural icons. They were celebs. Like, they kind of, I suppose they rivaled the Carney brothers for the most famous set of brothers in Ireland, and they're probably more kind of more famous, you could say, than modern day Carney. So in a competition like this, the profile does help. You know, if you're looking for votes on a Twitter poll, of course it's the Donovans. Everyone's going to know them, and the bigger the poll gets on Sunday, and the more retweets, the more people see it, the more people would probably come in behind Paul. But it's worth noting too that Gary and Paul have really stepped back from media duties in the last 18 months, you could say, to 2 years. We don't see that many interviews with them kind of nationally and locally. They just they've taken that stance of just stepping back, unless it's at could be the Ploughing Championships they're there, or at an FBD launch or something like that. That's when you get access to Gary and Paul, which is a shame, I think, because when it comes to rowers, I think they're brilliant to interview, absolutely brilliant. Some of my best interviews have been with rowers. Kind of Gary and Paul are superb to interview when you have them one-on-one or one-on-two, because there's an honesty and an openness there. There's no cliches. They call it as they see it. So I think for when people talk now about kind of Ireland's greatest sports person, you never see Paul O'Donovan's name in the mix at all. And maybe it's because rowing is a minority sport, but we're talking about a fella who's 25, 26, a four-time world champion. He's won Ireland's first Olympic rowing medal. He should be in that conversation, but he's not, because he might have the profile off the back at 2016, but in the last couple of years, they're not as prevalent in the media. You know, you don't see them in Sunday newspapers, a two-page spread on Gary and Paul dressed in the finest suits like we did back then, or pictures of Gary and Paul in a field full of grass or something like that, as we did when they were doing the scene. So it's interesting to see the kind of the stance they've adopted, and put that against Phil Healy at the moment. Phil is an absolute joy to kind of interview, and she's at the other end of the phone, other end of the text message. You know, she's back to you straight away, and you see a lot of kind of interviews with Phil in Irish media, whether it's radio stations and newspapers and so on, and she's doing a fantastic job of promoting athletics. She sees that as part of her role. She's obviously she's an athlete number one, but she's kind of promoting athletics side by side, and that has a knock-on effect too. So that's why I think Sunday could be interesting in our Best in the West poll, because Phil has a very active and current and live kind of following, as opposed to the rowers who are, I suppose, off 2016, we know Gary and Paul, but rowing only ever really comes into the public consciousness in the Olympic year, or maybe when the lads win a gold medal at the World Championship. So it's going to be interesting. You're putting these two sports people of, I suppose, different activeness on social media and media up against each other. And just on that, Phil Healy on Instagram is brilliant to follow. She puts up her training, what she's doing, and so on. But compare that to the two boys, Gary and Paul, where they're not as active on social media. And especially when we're talking about a poll on Twitter, that, you know, maybe that could have some factor in Sunday.
Okay, lads, let's get predictions then for both semi-finals. Kieran, we'll come to you first. Bill Daly versus Keith Cronin, and Paul O'Donovan versus Phil Healy. Who's going to be in the final?
From the first semi-final, I'm going to back Keith Cronin to come through from that one, Jack. He's built up momentum over the first two rounds. He's brought in huge votes, and I think he'll get past Bill Daly on Saturday. And then on Sunday, I have to go Paul O'Donovan. I wrote the book on Skibbereen Rowing Club. If I have any chance of getting the sequel, I have to back the rower. I think it's going to be quite tight. Paul O'Donovan pulled in a big vote when he beat Niall Cahalan, and it was substantially up on his win in the first round. So it's going to be very close between Paul and Phil, but I'd just be tipping Paul O'Donovan to come through this one. And
Dennis, the two semi-finals, Bill Daly versus Keith Cronin and Phil Healy versus Paul O'Donovan. Where's your money going?
Without much science behind it, I would say Keith Cronin and Paul O'Donovan.
Okay, Dennis. Well, before we wrap up today's show, I just wanted to ask you about the Larry Tompkins book that we mentioned earlier in the podcast. We'll probably do a special podcast dedicated to it when it comes out, but when can we expect to see it on shelves? How was it to write it and work alongside Larry, and are you excited, I suppose?
Right now I'm fairly drained, just because it was a big effort to get it done, and just having finished it, I just need to kind of chill for a bit, but it was great to do it. You know, really enjoyed working with Larry. Some great memories, and I was hoping that I was able to do it all justice. So the release date will be sometime around the middle of September. There's no set date yet, but you know, hopefully it'll be kind of at a time when the GAA is back in full swing, and people are looking forward to you know, to being able to get their teeth into it, because it is a very strong story. You know, he even a few of the people that got to look over it commented on how they'd forgotten a lot of the things mentioned in it. That it's kind of hard to illustrate, you know, in the current climate, just what a big star he was back then and how much he broke the mold. So, you know, hopefully it'll get a good response, and that people get some insight into the character, the kind of dedicated and driven character Harry was, which made him the best footballer in Ireland for a period of a few years in the late 80s and early 90s.
Great stuff. Well, remember to keep an eye on Twitter on Saturday and Sunday for both those semi-finals. That's Kieran McCarthy's Twitter. Kieran, just remind us of your handle again if anyone wants to search it.
On Twitter, it's at KieranMac_SS. So it's KIERAN cap M small c cap C _SS, and you'll find me there.
Great stuff. Well, I look forward to it. Thanks for listening to the Star Sport podcast. We'll be back on Tuesday. If you enjoy these shows, please make sure to rate, review and subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, Acast, Stitcher or wherever else you listen to the show.